In this episode dedicated to sustainability, I discuss with GJ the pressing need to overhaul traditional notions of success in business. GJ has been a visiting professor, author, as well as expert on sustainability and transformational leadership, as well as systemic change. Welcoming you to the Thriving in the Age of Disruption podcast series, GJ. And it's really exciting that we can have you here today.
That's great. Thank you so much also for inviting me. I think it's always very nice to exchange thoughts with good thinkers. My name is Geert-Jan van der Zanden, which is a hard to pronounce name from the Netherlands. I grew up there, but I spent most of my life outside of the Netherlands. I'm currently a senior advisor and visiting professor of sustainability and transformational leadership at Zanden School of Management in Bangkok, Thailand. I focus on systems transformation. I just wrote a book about systems transformation called Transforming Our Critical Systems that was published by Cambridge University Press. I'm not an academic as such, even though I work for the business school. My background is really as a practitioner. I've been a managing director for the last 10 years in a sustainability strategy and leadership development advisory firm back in Europe, where I worked with leadership team in some of the world's progressive companies, really companies like Unilever, MasterCard, IKEA, and helping them navigate the sustainability transition and equip their leadership teams with the right skills. Started in the Netherlands, but I've been away for 30 years. I lived in 10 different countries in those years. So I'm also, as a result of that, I'm a big fan of diversity. Human diversity as well as biodiversity. So I also love to hike and dive and be part of nature.
Lovely. Thank you for the very comprehensive introduction, from both your career perspective as well as your personal interest. I thought we'll just dive in and talk a little bit about sustainability transitions, because you mentioned that you'd worked with some of the most leading companies in the world in supporting them to do that transition into sustainability. And when you work on those projects, what are the key challenges usually to even get started?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Sustainability is something that we cannot get around, right? There's no alternative. We have to reinvent the ways in which we produce and consume and transport things, because we're going beyond what the earth can support us in, and also increasingly we're eroding the social fabric more and more. As you see some people getting very rich and other people staying poor. So that income inequality is also becoming an issue. So we need to reinvent our models, and that is really the whole thinking behind the sustainability movement. And as I said, it's not an option; it's something that we have to do. Climate change is coming, but it's not only climate change; it's also resource scarcity. There's water scarcity in different parts of the planet, and that is getting worse. They need to start thinking how they can contribute to making that transition, to helping the world move to these new models. And there are certain pathways that you can take as a company. Companies are looking at how they can move to net zero, for instance, when it comes to carbon emissions. The whole net zero concept also applies to other aspects, right? You could also look at how can I be net zero in water, for instance, or how can I be net zero in other types of resource use. But many companies are not seeing yet, and I really hope they start to see that, is that the sustainability transition is also a strategic opportunity. It's not only about complying with regulations or targets that have been set to reduce footprints, but it's an opportunity to reinvent your business model and to help your customers become successful in their efforts to reduce their impact, for instance. And that becomes a tremendous business opportunity. countries around the world, and I think Europe is probably taking the lead in that, are spending billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars trying to stimulate that transition. And that money will go to the companies that decide to be at the forefront of that transition. It's so important for us to be successful in that transition. And that's what I focus on a lot as well when we talk about systemic transformation. There are different ways in which you can try to change a system, but systems are very complex. They're made up of many different actors, with all of these actors have their own agenda, their own dynamics, and sometimes competing.
TJ, you were giving us a definition of what it takes to do systemic transformation. And if you can just share with our listener, what it entails and what are we actually talking about?
Yeah, so systemic transformation it's a very complex, a very challenging topic, and that's why I'm so enthused by it in a way. Let me start at the beginning, right? So we know that we need to change our systems, and when I talk about a system, I mean the system of actors and dynamics that has organized itself around satisfying our human or societal needs. So, for instance, we need to eat. That's why we have a food system, a system that produces our food, transports it, deals with the waste. So that's what I call a system. But today we see that many of our systems are very inefficient, and they have many undesired side effects. They produce waste, or they produce too much greenhouse gas, or the value chain, the value created in the value chain is not distributed in a fair way. So we need to change many of our systems. And the United Nations came up with its Sustainable Development Goals, which reflects, in a way, what are the dimensions that we need to change. The problem is that systems are very complex, as I said, made up of many different actors, different dynamics, different agendas, sometimes competing agendas. So how do you change a system? That is the big challenge here, and there's been a lot of studies, a lot of philosophizing around the topic also. And what we see a lot is that at the moment we're still trying to change systems by making shallow interventions. And when I say shallow interventions, you should think about introducing a tax or a subsidy or a standard. And those are shallow interventions. They're not very powerful interventions, because if the design of the system still pushes the system in one direction, a tax won't fix it. For instance, if you have an economic system, as today in many countries, where most of the wealth creation accumulates with a small group of people, let's call them stakeholders. Then you can introduce a tax, but it's not going to change the system. So deeper interventions are in the design of the system, for instance, or in the way more stakeholders can have a voice in designing the system. That is a more powerful way to reorganize the system. And the most powerful way to reorganize the system is intervening at the level of mindset and paradigms. So if we can change the mindset through which a system was designed, and if we can change the objectives for which the system was designed, you're going to end up with a much better system than when you're only tweaking some taxes or some subsidies. So systemic change is a really complex issue, because changing mindsets is not easy. It's easy to introduce a tax. It's very difficult to change mindsets, but we need to start looking at that. Clearly, we're not just changing taxes and subsidies as we are doing now, or setting targets is not getting us there. We have the SDGs. We've been working on them since 2015. We set targets for 2030. We have 17 SDGs. We have 160 something targets under those 17 SDGs. We're almost missing all of those targets. We're vastly off track for reaching most of those targets. I think only 15% of these targets are on track. Most of them are stalled, and I think something like 18, 19% of the targets are actually backtracking and actually going backwards. So clearly, the objectives are noble and right, but we're not going about it in the right way. The way we're trying to achieve the SDGs is not working at the moment. We need to start thinking also about more radical system level reinvention. And that's what I'm focusing on. That's what the book that I wrote is all about.
And so what are some ideas that you have for this radical reinvention?
There's no silver bullet here that I can explain to you in 2 minutes. Each system is different, but one thing that we see happening in society now is that society is polarizing. Technology is not helping us at the moment in depolarizing society. Right? One way in which we can get more people involved again in designing systems together and at least getting shared visions of how the system works and what we would like it to be, is to bring the dialogue back. Right now we're in a polarized society where people only talk to people that agree with them, and they think that people that don't agree with them are really wrong, and that's a fault in the way we're dealing with each other right now. So building platforms for constructive dialogue is one of the starting points for us to start building shared understanding of how because the problems are common problems. The problem in the food system or climate change, it's not a problem only for Democrats or only for Republicans. It's everyone's problem, right? So we need to start building shared understanding and shared vision, and then we can start identifying where in the system it makes sense to intervene. At the moment, we're going in a different direction. We're not listening to each other. So this is just like a very basic thing. You asked a very big question, of course, but this is a very basic first step that we need to consider.
It's really great that you have shared something which is valuable for everyone. And it's also very close to my heart because I run a small boutique consultancy, and we do corporate culture change work, and we work mainly with family-owned businesses. In some ways, when the family is visionary enough, you get that tipping point where they can move the entire system. And of course, most times it is harder to work with them because they are very much adverse to change or rocking the boat. And about 3 years ago, we started working with a family in Vietnam, which was in the ceramic tiles manufacturing business. And as a result of creating a 30-year vision for the family, they started to look at different scenarios that they were imagining a world where man may not be a man anymore, but it might be a machine, right? Because we're living in this moment where technology is really overtaking a lot of our lives. And so if that's the future, then really making more money doesn't make any difference. It's the quality of that future. And the quality of the future is not just about money for my generations or more my family, but it's really the society, how it's engaging and how it's going forward. And so it was really amazing. The 3 next generation successors took on just one commitment for 30 years, and that was that they would invest their time and effort to the 3 Ps. And they defined 3 Ps as, one was people's inner development, which is to your point that if people don't have awareness about themselves and how they are part of the system, larger system, then there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences. And so, how do we get that knowledge, that awareness out to a greater group of people? And they came up with the audacious goal that they'll have 1 million people take on a 3-day system awareness program so that they have that to drive their next step. whether it's in entrepreneurship or it's in public service. And then they looked at planet renewal as another subset of 3P. And the last part was actually looking at progress sharing or prosperity sharing, because, a large number of their workforce are actually people who earn something like $2 or $3 a day. And how do you actually take them in a sustainable way to earning $1,000 a month without putting them into a debt cycle? I mean, fintech was going to be the greatest, hope for all, the unbanked and the unserved. But what it has done is that, we give them such high interest rates, and we make it so onerous that they get back into the debt cycle rather than, move upwards. So when they created the 3P commitments, what they saw over the 1-2 years as they worked in the company in transforming the company to be a match for that future, because, they are in an industry which depletes natural resources and they contribute to pollution. And it's like you can't go and reinvent that industry literally overnight unless you build a new factory. And like you said, there are these actors. So, you have to talk to the different stakeholders, whether it's the fellow manufacturers or your suppliers and your customers who are your distributors. And each one has their own agenda, not want to change. So how do you actually, get them on board? And mind you, all this is not being done at the government level, because even the taxes and subsidies have not trickled down to industries as such, because, governments have their priorities and they're focusing on different things, right? And so we thought it was really brave of the family to take on, okay, let's take our industry. But, and then they saw that, okay, maybe we need to create a parallel organization, because, when a system has been built in a particular way, you can't really make much of a change unless you have a parallel organization. And so they created like a NGO kind of a structure where these 3 commitments could be actually furthered by the work of this new organization. And then they started to cross-link it back to their corporate organization to have a group of people who now are aware about systems thinking, systems awareness, and are doing 3P innovation in their organization, in their factory floor, about different ideas, whether it is to go to the villages and talk about, food wastage, or dealing with responsible production and consumption. In some ways, this was a very organic, DJ, because, it's like you don't get case studies about what you're going to do. You're out there literally making up the rules and just checking out whether it works or not. And is that what the journey is all about for the early adopters? Because, the early adopters in this age, right, would have to test and prototype.
Yes, we all need to go through that learning journey, but we can learn a lot from other people or other companies' experiences as well. What you said, that family companies, you said, are often hesitant to change, which might be the case in some cases. But there's also a very nice aspect of family companies, is that they tend to have a longer view into the future, right? They don't need to report profits, every 3 months. So they can take a look, and they've been around for generations, and so they can think in terms of generations rather than in reporting cycles, and that actually makes family-owned companies very interesting to work with. And I love the work that you do, where you help companies to develop their vision. I think doing that work, engaging a large amount of people in your company to jointly develop a purpose and translate that into a vision of what what a role does your company play in that purpose. And the purpose is what type of a world would you like to create? And what role can you play as a company in creating that world? That is such a powerful guidance for companies through crises. It is such a powerful way for companies to get the right people on board, to mobilize their supply chains for that higher purpose, right? Um, I, we especially the Western world, I think, has been very materialistic, very efficiency oriented, because there was a capitalist system behind it that was demanding efficiency in return on investment. And all of that is great, but we need to find ways of integrating more purpose into that activity. And that's being done. The discussion now is not only on financial profits and financial reporting. Nowadays we also need to report on social and environmental impact. So we're moving in the right direction, and that's why I think that type of work of developing purpose for your company, creating this space and time for everyone in the company to think about this. How does my personal purpose? What is my purpose? How does it connect to my company's purpose? That can unlock tremendous amounts of innovation and energy.
How can companies get access to case studies and methodology? Your book probably shares some of it. If they're not the Fortune 500 companies and they have limited resources, where can they?
Well, as you say in my book, I try to give a high level idea of the journey that companies need to consider, and it's really at two levels. One is at what I call a compliance level. So regulations are changing because countries have made commitments, especially on greenhouse gases, but more and more also on biodiversity and other issues. So as a company, you need to be aware of what those commitments are. You need to do your what they call a materiality analysis, so that you know what's important for you as a business, what is important to your stakeholders, and that helps you prioritize where you're going to focus your societal impact effort. So this is quite the compliance work stream, I can call it that way, is fairly straightforward. What is important to you and your stakeholders? How am I performing at the moment on those dimensions? So you need to do some accounting there, and reporting, and then you need to devise a strategy. If you say, well, we need to improve our water footprint, or we need to improve our waste footprint or our greenhouse gas emissions, then you devise a strategy around that. So that's pretty straightforward. The other pillar of sustainability transition is more complex, but also more powerful. And this is where companies start to reinvent themselves for that sustainable future. So then you need to do much more visioning work. You need to understand strategically why you want to change. And you need to, as the leaders in the company, need to translate that into a change narrative, because they need to change their internal state. They need to get their internal stakeholders on board. They also need to get their external stakeholders on board with the change. They need to convince their the people that provide capital that this change is going to make sense. And then you need to implement that change. So then you need to go through this building of awareness and building a movement, building a culture in your company where everyone automatically takes these sustainability considerations into account when they take decisions. So it's not only about money and efficiency anymore. It's also about your societal and environmental impact. And that is really a tweak to the model that we have right now. We had a very simplistic capitalist model where for too long we said the only thing that matters is making money, even if it causes external damage, if it causes damage to nature or to society. Well, we're entering a new era now. So it's still about how can we be as efficient as possible, but we need to deliver on. We need to be economically sustainable. You won't be around for long if you don't make money. So you have to make sure that you are economically sustainable, but you also have to make sure that you clean up any mess that you create environmentally. Nowadays, they call it regenerative leadership, right? So we have actually eroded nature and society so much that it's starting to cost us money. We have eroded nature's ability to provide us with clean air or clean water. So nowadays, actually, we need to help nature recover its ability to give us natural services. They call it regenerative leadership, and that's how we can create a better world again.
Well, what I comes to mind now is actually a possible pushback from the stakeholders, including employees, because in any change effort, you will have promoters and you will have opposers. And how do you think, we can deal with opposers effectively so that they don't derail that change?
That's a really good question. And of course, the first thing is to really try to understand the opposers. This goes back to my story before, where I said, we're not always going about systemic change in the right way. Sometimes it is invented somewhere at the top, and then we identify a number of KPIs or targets, and we put a couple of incentives in there, and then we hope it's going to happen. That's not enough. You will need your targets and your incentives, but you need to bring people on board, and is that onboarding process, which is much more of a psychological and cultural process, and it's about making sure that people are heard, that all the stakeholders are heard, and that they can contribute to the design of that new system that you're trying to achieve. Maybe you recognize again that there are these 3 different levels of where you can intervene in a system. You can either set targets and incentives and a tax or a subsidy.
Yes.
Or you can involve stakeholders in that dialogue to jointly figure out what is important, how the system should be designed. And even better is if you can help everyone develop the understanding and the mindset and buy into the new paradigms that underlie the creation of a new system. So there are these 3 different levels of how you can go about creating a new system. So when you talk about opponents, don't impose things on stakeholders. We live in a world where people are too connected and too opinionated and often too well informed to get stuff imposed on them. Engage them and ideally engage them in the design. Listen to them. Try to reflect the input that you get into the design of your new system, and engage them in building that joint vision and the mindset. What we need is a shift in mindset where we don't only care about money anymore, where we recognize it's fine to make money, but don't ask society or nature to clean up your mess, to deal with the externalities, with the expenses of your focus on money. Also, make sure you create, or you at least maintain, value for nature and society. That is the shift in mindset. And I think most people agree with that they've just been trained for decades to just be as efficient as possible in making money. And that's just a story that they were told when they were in, the leaders, when they were in business school in the 1970s. That's what they were being told. We need to start telling people a different story.
And what is Zanden doing as a business school to change that, paradigm of thinking, right? So that you can have future leaders who can be more sustainable.
We try to work on that in a very deliberate way. First of all, we all of our, let's call it core curricula, the finance courses, marketing courses, etc. We're working with all the existing faculty to really try to optimize the sustainability or impact-oriented content in their courses. So we still have finance courses, we still have marketing courses, but we make sure that we bring in the sustainability and impact discussion into those courses. And then also we deliberately work on developing the right mindset in the students. So we have a 9-credit course, which is the equivalent of 3 normal university courses. in a module that we call Skills and Values for Mindful Leaders. In a very playful way, also, very practical way. All of our students need to go through that course before they can start their MBA or their EMBA. And this is where we help students think about their purpose. We help students understand how they should think about systems, how they can engage stakeholders, to understand stakeholders better, and to work with stakeholders. It's equipping them with the basic tools and the basic way of thinking for them to start creating positive societal impact. And of course, you can't do that in just a few weeks. This is a 7-week module, but it puts people on the right track. We ask them to identify which societal or environmental aspect they care about most, and they would like to impact during their time at SAS and afterwards. And, our MBA is very action oriented, so we have lots of practical projects where students need to work with companies to do consulting projects, for instance. They take that societal issue that they are passionate about as a guidance in choosing which company and which challenge they will work on. As they work on these practical projects, they build their knowledge, they build their understanding, and they apply it in a very practical way. We try to develop that mindset. We try to help people think about their purpose, and then we give them the practical tools and the practical opportunities.
Oh, I think it's so inspiring, that someone can go and do an MBA and get exposed to this whole aspect of who am I? And then to be able to contribute from who am I, that discovery of who am I as a purpose, and do meaningful work for the rest of our lives.
I've worked in business for most of my life. And, it's really exciting to now be working with the future generation of leaders. I learned the hard way, in a way. When I went to do an MBA, most of what I heard was the role of companies in society is to make as much money as possible.
Correct.
That was just the way it was programmed, and most of us were programmed. And I think it's really exciting to be able to transfer my learning. When I got on my MBA, I focused on being successful in banking and consulting and making money, and until you find out that life is really not about that. But it takes maybe a couple of decades before you really realize that, right? So I'm really excited about the opportunity of passing some of that learning on to new generations early, so that they can spend most of their professional life actually creating positive societal impact. That at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. I mean, we what's the use of being rich on a planet that's falling apart?
That's right. So true. Last question related to all this. So, you also do work in the area of transformational leadership. Now, I guess ultimately, once you've looked at the context of sustainability or systemic thinking / transformation, it comes down to the implementation, and it comes down to that individual. What is transformational leadership, and how distinct is that from the regular business as usual kind of leadership?
So, we spoke about changing our systems, because we create a much better world than we have today. It'll never be perfect. Quite radical reinvent systems. And if you want to change a system, someone needs to start, right? So if you want to change a system, you need at least one organization within that system to take the lead. Then you need some leader or leaders within that organization to take the lead. Right? These things don't happen on their own, right? So transformation of a system starts with an organization or a company becoming transformational, creating a transformational culture. And that starts with individual leaders within that organization, transforming their organization, being transformational leaders. And that implies much of what we spoke about before, understanding the bigger system, effectively engaging stakeholders, so that they also, come on board and or co-shape that understanding. It's a joint process. So in transformational leadership, we focus a lot on systems thinking, on futures thinking, which is, imagining the future through different lenses, not only the lens of technology. That nowadays, people think that technology is going to be the solution to everything, right? And when you ask someone to imagine the future, they will come with a technological story. What about values in the future? What about the balance between nature and society in the future? And you can only start creating a future if you imagine it first, right? We also work on that, helping people imagine a future that is not only one dimension, right? So different scenarios, different lenses, and then once you get into implementation, you need to start thinking about, okay, if I want to create this future that we imagine, you can't do that alone. This is by definition a collaborative process. If you want to become good at collaboration, you need to build those skills. So and part of that is deeply understanding the stakeholders that you're dealing with, building your narratives, your change narratives in such a way that your stakeholders totally are with you. There are tools that you can teach to do systems mapping, to do your stakeholder mapping, to build tailored narratives for different stakeholders. There are tools to do scenario planning or futures ideation. How can you target radical change in a way that where you're agile, but the radical change objective is always there. Our objective is to, when people walk out of the door here, that they are well versed with these tools, that they have a toolbox that's full of useful tools they're comfortable with, and they can start applying.
I think it's really powerful how you've described it. We think that, we have to copy someone's style or, look at that person's personality, or maybe they went to this particular university. But what you have decoded for us is that transformational leadership is all about, being almost like a meta system leader, whereby you're able to, bring your sense making of what's happening as an awareness. And then you are also clear about what's happening around you with your stakeholders. You're able to engage them, to include them, and then at some point to align so that people can get together and to move forward. At all points, you are providing that leadership, not just for yourself, because you've got your own frames and you've got your own perspectives that you have to be willing to let go of in order to be able to engage with others. But what's powerful about all this is that these are really tool sets, like you said, that someone can equip themselves and can get really competent to use them. And all they probably need is a deep commitment and maybe an awareness that, we are all in this shared journey together. And if we have that level of empathy or compassion, then, all we need to now do is to just learn these tools and we'll become this great meta system leader.
Probably the most important part that I would encourage everyone to stop and think about for some time is developing your personal purpose, right? That is so powerful. If you spend time thinking about what is the type of world that you want to create as an individual or as a company, or what is the big issue, that challenge that you want to positively contribute to, that becomes such a strong driver of your own activity, but also that is where you can get other people to join forces with you. There's nothing as powerful as a group of people that share the same purpose. I'm sure you know his name, Simon Sinek. He has this beautiful talk. He talks about the golden circles, right? So how do you get people with you? How do you get them on board? Because we need to do this together, right? And it's the why, the how, and the what. And you should start with why. Many people start talking about what they want to do, but we should talk to people about why we're in this. Why are we sitting around the table together? What is the big challenge that we agree on?
Correct.
We need to face? then everything else becomes easier.
I just wanted to add that what we've found in our visioning work, when we create the company's vision, that what's critical is that the individuals who are participating have to identify first and create their own personal purpose. Because if they don't get what's in it for me, as in what's, who am I and what's my purpose, they can't align to that share, common vision that you're trying to create. And so it goes hand in hand, and it becomes really powerful when people understand that. And so, like you said, why is a very important piece to fulfill.
So we're at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. We're all, living on the same planet, and we're responsible for that one planet. So if we mess up society, or if we mess up the planet, we all lose.
Wow, I've enjoyed this insightful discussion with you today, GJ. And I actually am looking forward to meeting up with you when I make my next trip to Thailand, Bangkok. So thank you for spending the time. So much.
Yeah, thank you too. I think these questions are really good, and it's nice to get into these topics. So thank you for the invitation.